Welcome to Changelog, where we explore the latest updates, enhancements, and changes to New Relic itself. In each episode, we dig into the new features and functionalities as told by the people who envisioned, shaped, and even coded them. We discuss the inspiration and the data behind the development, as well as common use cases and applications. I'm Leon Adato, one of the New Relic DevRel advocates, and joining me this week is Camden Swita. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And also we have Dan Holloran. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having us, Leon.
It is wonderful to have you. All right, so I know we're here to talk about a very specific thing, but before we do that, to prove that we are more than just talking heads, I want to find out a little bit about you. And more importantly, something that's exciting in your world, whether it has to do with tech or has nothing to do with tech. So, Dan, tell me a little bit about your job and what you do for fun.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a product marketing manager here at New Relic. I focus on a lot of DevOps and SRE capabilities that sort of make everybody's lives easier, I guess. Service levels, alerts and AI, workloads, and now change tracking being one of the new capabilities that I support. Some fun stuff going on in my life. I did just get a rack for the top of my car so I can put 2 fishing poles on the top, which I'm very excited about because I used to have to put them through the middle of my car. So
and out the front.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just right between me and the passenger.
Very good. My son would approve. He's a big fisherman. Okay, awesome. And Camden, what's new and cool in your life?
Let's see. So a product manager at New Relic, first of all. So I heard a lot of cats. I talked to a lot of customers, try to figure out what we can build that'll hopefully make their lives easier. And then just sort of coordinate on getting the requirements down and working with the dev teams to make it real. So brought on specifically to work on change tracking and have since also taken on our lookout capability. So gradually sort of covering all of the what's changed kind of topics at New Relic.
Got it.
As far as what's new in my life, so I mean, as we record this, change tracking is on the verge of launching. So of course, a lot of my attention has been there. But in my personal life, I just signed up for one of those you and a group of people are gonna run from like one distant point to another that would be too far for one person, a relay, right?
Oh, got it. Okay.
They've never done one of those before. I'm pretty terrified of it. So we'll see. I have a few months to train though. And then just otherwise, besides trail running and whatnot, I write short stories for fun. Not good ones, but like, I make an attempt, and I do some workshops every week. So, there's effort there.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so we will include links to some of your work in the show notes, which I want to remind people who are listening that if we mention, a document or download or a blog or whatever, there will be links to that in the show notes if you're looking for that, as well as links to what we're here to talk about today, which is change tracking. And so to get into that, I'm gonna try to say this name. Heraclitus is a Greek philosopher. He's quoted as saying, "Change is the only constant in life." But I'm here to tell you that change is the bane of the existence of IT practitioners everywhere, as Dan and Camden can verify for me. But obviously, things have to change to get better. So, systems have to get built, bugs have to get fixed, features have to get released, that kind of stuff. So really, it's not all change that we're worried about. Rather, it's maybe unplanned, unmanaged, undetected changes that trip us up. So recently, New Relic released a new feature that we're calling change tracking because naming things is hard, and why not just be obvious? So you both have generously decided to carve out some time to talk on the show, and which is called, ironically, Changelog. So, it's all birds of a feather here. So let's start off slow. I want to start off just at the basics and sort of build our way up. Let's start off with the concept of change tracking in general. Just what is it? What's it all about?
Sure, yeah.
Start? Oh, Camden. Okay.
With change tracking, it all sort of starts with the acknowledgement that the company that ships reliable features faster than its competition tends to perform better and also have happier developers and development teams. So they not only deliver the value faster and keep users from melting down and just in general happier, but they see less burnout, turnover, and better supported end user experience overall, which I think across any organization like that has benefits. But we've seen a variety of data, numerous surveys that suggest developers spend anywhere between 20 and 50% of their time triaging, diagnosing, and fixing problems with existing code. And I mean, that a lot of that is just simply trying to answer this question, you know, what exactly has changed to make this perfectly fine thing suddenly, you know, turn upside down and float to the surface. And they're not building and shipping new features, new user-pleasing features when they're doing that, of course.
Right. And hashtag this is why we drink. Right.
Exactly. So it's why we drink and why we build change tracking. So, and you know, of course, because
well done.
We know is, yeah, that's maybe put that on the marketing site there, Dan. What we know is that the vast majority, like maybe some people even say 90+% of causes of these issues is in fact something has changed, whether it's deliberate or not. And of course, with distributed workforces today and development teams being so large and so many different teams working on so many different parts of a system, it's increasingly difficult to tell what in fact has changed. And so, you know, whether it's commits, outages, configuration changes, dependency version updates, even things like marketing campaigns, product launches, they're all behind, you know, cases where the developers are getting pulled off of feature development, new work, and dropped into situation rooms.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And to your point, Camden, without some kind of change, nothing really ever happens, right? And so that's not even just in software development, that's just in business in general. And so whether the infrastructure is automatically changing or a deployment is pushed and it affects some sort of related infrastructure or application for a different team, or it is some kind of major business event, these things affect the application's performance and uptime, and yeah, everything is just related to change, right? And so change tracking helps our developers and the business teams with those development teams to understand how their operations are impacting success and failure.
Sure. Okay, so I think that outlines the idea of change tracking, and we're hinting at, you know, why we're here, but New Relic is really about, you know, monitoring and observability. So how does including change tracking in a monitoring tool, how does that help developers, users, customers? You know, what's the benefit to integrating those two things? Because some people might say, yeah, but those are two totally separate things. Why are you not staying in your lane? Is this in our lane?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's really hard to separate the two at this point, I would say. I mean, users can share context everywhere in the New Relic platform across all of their different golden signals and their performance metrics. And basically all you're doing is adding a little annotation to all of these different key performance indicators showing that you did something that changed it, how it affected their infrastructure, error rates, the number of anomalies that popped up, latency, pretty much any type of metric you really care about. And so you really have to correlate your monitoring with your custom dashboards and with the new change tracking UI and the change tracking markers. Users can alert off of all of these deployments, and they can also correlate these incidents in the New Relic Alerts and AI interface. So, I mean, you can basically see the problem starting from when the deployment happens all the way to the incident detection, acknowledgement, and remediation.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge too that, you know, systems have become so complex, applications, you know, infrastructures and so on, and too intricate really for any one person or even one team to be able to wrap their heads around. And so without this automated data-driven assistance of something like change tracking that's recording changes and helping you see, okay, this is exactly when this thing happened, regardless of whether or not you knew ahead of time that it was going to happen or whether or not your team even has anything to do with it. And being able to see those changes in the context of these spikes or valleys in your telemetry, I think is just absolutely essential, especially as systems just continue to get more complicated and as you know, deployment pipelines become more complex and, you know, incorporate more testing steps and so on and so forth. So, you know, and the other thing too is we want to recognize that, you know, deployment tracking, as it's sort of known, is not a new concept in observability in our kind of neck of the woods. A lot of observability tools have basic deployment tracking features to help mark, okay, this is when we released a new version of this service on production. But I think what they lack, and what change tracking is trying to acknowledge, is they lack the flexibility and power to kind of take all of the different types of changes that can happen inside of modern systems and modern deployment processes and contextualize those to telemetry. So there's just too many sources and too great a variety of changes that can influence the performance and quality of a system to just rely on deployment tracking.
Yeah, and I just, for those folks who aren't used to, the New Relic, patter of things, we say a lot of words that have a lot of meaning behind it for us. But when we talk about things, a lot of things we say in context. We have traces in context and logs in context, and now we have change tracking in context. The whole point is that when New Relic, collects all this information on metrics and events and logs and traces and everything else that's going on that we're pulling in, and then can also within that same period of time say, that went up, that went down, this thing happened over here, and boom, there was a change there. Now all of a sudden you understand the entire flow of events within your environment in context. I mean, again, we say in context and we have all this layers of meaning, but if you're hearing it for the first time, it's just a couple of words. But when we say in context, it means that we are collecting all the data and then showing it together in a cohesive picture to go a long way. So changes absolutely matter when you're dealing with a spike in a drop in performance or a spike in usage or whatever, and you see that there was this change to the code just before that. All of a sudden things start to reveal themselves, like, oh, maybe that wasn't as innocuous a change as I thought it was, or whatever. Like I said, I just wanted to unpack some of that. And thank you for hitting the next point, which is, why New Relic? Why did we build this? We built it because we are already collecting all that other data, and change is just another facet of that for, again, the context of it all. Did I miss anything in that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you're exactly right. It's basically just, we decided to invest in this area because we asked ourselves, what if it was easy for anyone on any team to know exactly, what has changed across the entire system, regardless of the nature of the change and whether they had anything to do with it or where it came from. So I think it's exactly it. I mean, I think it's just going to ultimately, hopefully, be a huge time saver for development teams and ops professionals.
Yeah, and to your point, even if your team or you as the individual didn't cause that change or initiate that change, you can still see that it occurred and figure out how to, triage and troubleshoot and escalate the problem to the right person or team who did initiate that change. So there's a ton of in context, like you're talking about, not only with your technical systems, but also with the teams who support those technical systems.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned the technology before we dive into the demo, because I can't live another minute without seeing this. But before we do that, I think one question that folks who are watching this episode are going to ask themselves is, okay, yeah, but I'm using blah, 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 is that going to work for me? So can one of you run down the different tech that we're currently involved in? Obviously, we will continue to expand that list, but what can I hope to use change tracking with right now?
Sure, yeah. So New Relic users can continue. So let's back up a second. So in APM, there's an existing API called the REST API v2 that allows users to record very basic deployment markers today. Okay. That will continue to exist. So anybody who's listening, who's thinking to themselves, I think we use the REST API, just know that will exist for some amount of time into the future. It's not necessarily the topic du jour, though, but just a heads up about that. But the topic du jour is we did build a new Nerd Graph API that's open and going to become increasingly flexible as we continue to enhance it. But with this Nerd Graph API, we're also releasing a Jenkins plugin, as well as a GitHub Actions integration and New Relic CLI support, which will help again, in conjunction with that NerdGraph API, allow our users to create, record changes to APM, browser, mobile, service level management entities, any kind of entity. Actually, the NerdGraph API will support any entity type, and then you'll be able to see those changes in APM, browser, mobile, service level management dashboards, and so on. And then we see these integrations, the Jenkins plugin and the GitHub Actions integration that I mentioned. We see those as just the start, and we see integrations with CI/CD tools to be absolutely fundamental and foundational to the success of this product. So we are going to continue to invest in either, giving existing integrations the facelifts they need to work with this new NerdGraph API. So we're, think of, GitLab, JFrog, Circle CI, you name it. And then kind of go into new territory that New Relic wouldn't have traditionally considered, coming from a perspective that didn't include change tracking. But we will continue to release those integrations over time, and I think they may be coming faster than people really anticipate. So whatever you're using, our hope is that basically you'll be able to set something up in your tools to just automatically start recording these changes and then provide, whether it's custom attributes or other bits of information that are going to really help you easily kind of connect those pre-production processes and artifacts to what's happening in your production monitoring tool. So
very cool. All right, I can't live another minute without seeing it. So let's go ahead and jump into the demo. Oh, all the colors. That looks so beautiful. Tell me what I'm looking at. I have no idea.
So this is an APM entity summary page on production. So this is an example service that we use for demo purposes called the plan service. And just to kind of start, some users may already be seeing these updated interfaces, but before even watching this, and certainly by the time we GA, everyone will be seeing it. But just to kind of acknowledge something, so some users may be used to kind of the old APM entity deployments option over here on the left nav. And just to click into that to kind of set some context, this is a very old set of interfaces that New Relic has had for like 9 years, like longer than anybody can remember. And essentially what we'll be doing is replacing this wholesale when we GA. So you can think of change tracking as a replacement for the APM deployment service that removes all barriers around it. So whereas the old APM deployments was, APM entities only, very limited data model with that API, limited functionality in general, we'll be replacing that and really just sort of blowing the doors off of the features. And of course, revamp user experiences and so on. So let's kind of consider and see what all that means. So looking at the plan service here, on the left, the tried and true method of getting to your deployments on any entity, and this includes on the plan service here, or mobile browser entities, you name it, we'll be going to the deployments option in the left. And you may see this eventually get folded into a change tracking left nav section as we continue to support additional types of change events and over time. But of course, this is going to pull up a list of your deployments that you've recorded on this service. The table columns are resizable. You can easily support or sort them and so on. And you can sort of change what you will to kind of make the visual experience what it is, or maybe minimize some type of column in favor of another. But clicking on any of these rows will bring up a new interface that we're calling the deployment analysis UI. And what this essentially endeavors to do is allows the user to get a before and after snapshot of the impact that this change had on the health and quality of the entity. So this is the plan service, an example entity we use in Demotron. But what we've done here in this change tracking UI is put this change right down the middle of these charts. We've brought in the entity's golden signals, and we calculate, before and after this change using an average 3 hours before, 3 hours after. This is what we think that this golden signal, this is how much this golden signal has changed, to kind of give you an idea of like, what is the magnitude of the change if I am noticing significant drops or changes in general. And we've also gone and queried other parts of New Relic, so things like errors inbox, logs, anomalies, issues, and incidents, we go and we facet those experiences by this change. So this timestamp, this entity GUID. And what we do is we bring in, specific records from those experiences. And then we try to also highlight maybe some notable changes in certain attributes. So for example, if there were regressions that we had noticed coming back in as after this deployment, this change, then we would surface those here. Same with any changes in warn or error logs. Same with issues, incidents, and again, anomalies. A couple other notable improvements or new features here is that you can change you can actually change the time period before and after the deployment you're using for the analysis. So doing that will refresh all of these pages. Of course, change the axis of the charts, as well as just change the actual readings that we're returning, again, because we're using this time period to kind of frame what we're looking at. And this can be all the way down to a minute before and after, or you can set it to, a long time. There's also a new comparison feature that allows you to sort of do head-to-head comparison of two different changes or deployments. So, and again, in this case, this will basically refresh these insights here to help us understand, okay, between these two deployments or changes, which perform better in terms of errors, logs, anomalies, golden signals, you name it.
So I want to just focus for a second on this, because a lot of stuff just jumped out at me just from, my grizzled, warhorse of monitoring, is that unlike most of the views that we look at with monitoring, which is, how long a period of time we want to look at, because a change event is a point in time, the ability to say, I want X amount of time before or after or around the change is a different contextualization. It doesn't change the whole world, but it certainly is the right way to think about it. Like, I want to see this much before and after this one point in time. But the ability to go head to head with a different change and say, well, this one actually caused a performance hit, or this one actually, helped more than this other one. I think that could really affect the way development teams approach any change, being able to effectively Monday morning quarterback, how a change went like that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to gush about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's great to hear. We think so too. So we're really excited to see how people start using this. Again, whether it's, Monday morning saying, let's look at the last deployment we did compared to the one before, or the one we just did compared to the one before, and then just being able to kind of monitor this over time. And again, continue to kind of change the window as you see fit to understand, are things generally speaking getting better or getting worse? And this is a concept too that we want to kind of continue extending and expanding on in the future to help teams really start to understand, like you can almost think of it as like Dora style metrics of like, over time is our release quality getting better or worse? Is there any kind of correlation between release frequency and the relative performance of these releases, you name it? So you can imagine sort of where this comparison style can take you.
Yep.
Yeah. So just to kind of continue kind of showing off some of the new features, let me actually back up here. I always sort of get sucked into the new UI when I'm looking at it, but I'll back up and kind of start from like let's just sort of take this from like a demo use case perspective. But again, I'm here on the APM summary page, which for people maybe listening to the podcast is sort of the main page you'll look at on any entity in New Relic, whether it's browser, mobile, or APM, as you're just sort of getting like a high level view of what's gone on recently with that service or app or whatever. And we see on these charts, these kind of, they've become known internally as the lollipops, but you see these lollipop markers, there's sort of pinhead looking markers. And historically, some changes have been marked on charts in APM specifically, but the big difference now with the release of change tracking is these markers that we see here that are helping us understand what maybe has led to some of these increases or decreases in certain metrics. These will be basically everywhere we can get them. So they'll be at launch on APM charts, mobile charts, browser charts, dashboard charts, service level management. And then we'll basically continue sort of expanding the reach of the visibility of these change markers to every experience that has charts in it that we can get our hands on. So, of course, a big one is infrastructure. We'll be looking at all different types of infrastructure interfaces, workloads, you name it. So that's something to kind of note. But the other biggie is that, you know, you can actually interact with these lollipops or these change markers now. Whereas before you could usually just, all you could do was hover over and look at the tooltip on a marker. What you're going to be able to do now is click on one anywhere it's appearing, again, even on custom dashboards, and open this deployment analysis UI that we've just spent some time talking about. So the idea is that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether you're in Query Builder, on your custom dashboards, you know, deep in mobile or browser or APM, if you're observing something interesting in the telemetry that you're already collecting, and you see one of these change markers, whether it's on this entity or maybe on a related entity using our entity relationship service, which is another interesting way that change tracking sort of works with New Relic as a platform that we could go into maybe another time. But you can open up this analysis UI and again start doing this like very change focused analysis of like, okay, I can see based on the information provided why this change was made. I see who made it. I see I can get my change log. I can even grab the commit SHA, and so on and so forth. And so that's something notable and something that whether you're a brand new change tracking user or someone who used APM deployments, is something that people have been asking for a long time, is show me what's changed, but show me what's changed everywhere. I don't want to just be limited to like a single page in APM for seeing these types of changes. Another thing is I want to pull open a deployment that was actually made using the new NerdGraph API. So the deployments that we've been looking at in the deployments analysis UI, again, because this is a demo environment, we've been adding data to over time. Most of those the deployments we've been looking at were via the old REST API. And I want to reemphasize that as we've built everything to be backwards compatible. So if you're using the REST API today to record your APM deployments, you can continue to do so for at least some amount of time, and we'll give plenty of like end of life notification. But all of the new UIs, the new table, the new analysis UI, the new clickable markers, all of that will work with your old REST API deployment. So rest assured that nothing is going to be broken with the release of this. But what we're looking at now is actually the deployments analysis interface for a deployment that was made using the new NerdGraph API. And again, the NerdGraph API, switching to that or starting with that, frankly, if you're a new change tracking user, is going to get you several benefits. A few of them are the new integrations. So it's what the Jenkins plugin is built for. It's what the GitHub Actions plugin is built for. It's what all of our future integrations will be built towards. So if you want to kind of automagically record your deployment markers, think NerdGraph API, and there will be plenty of documentation on how to get started with that. But the other thing that it allows is it really sort of expands the data model for the events that you can record. So for example, you can start recording a type. And this is a precursor to, again, when I talk about us recording any change, regardless of the nature of that change, think categories and think types. And you can see that here in the NerdGraph API that we've built. You can also do things like record the commit SHA for that change and grab that and go do with it what you will. And you can also either link out to change logs and include like a deep link, say, to GitHub or to Jenkins or whatever CI/CD provider you use. But you can immediately jump to those other contexts if you determine, like, I need to go take a closer look at this pipeline, or I need to go roll this back, or whatever it might be. We support the deep linking right here in the UI. And then finally, there's this really interesting concept here of a group ID. And a group ID is, the way to think about that is it's simply just a way to logically group deployments together. So obviously, a lot of times changes are made in batches or groups or series or whatever it may be, or maybe Terraform has made changes to several different entities all at once. And you want to give that entire group of things a string, an ID association. It can just be a name. It could actually be a unique ID, whatever you want to use in this field is works for us. But what this will do then is it will actually populate a table like this in the UI that helps you understand, okay, this change wasn't made in isolation. These other changes have been logically grouped with it for whatever reason. They may be on completely different entities with completely different types, all the way on the other side of the, stadium from this entity here. And I want to go look at what that related change was, because for whatever reason, it's of interest to me in the context of this investigation. And you can open that UI right from where you're at. So again, it's more of this kind of in context. Go ahead.
And
sorry.
that's huge. That's okay. That's huge, because one of the drawbacks I've seen in other change tracking, things is that, yes, we can tell you that this change happened over here, but what else happened? Whether we're talking about infrastructure changes or code changes or whatever, being able to add that one tag that says, nope, all these things were associated, whether it was, again, a load balancer change and a code piece here and a front end, web, CSS change, tag change here or whatever, they all were part of the same effort, the same project. And therefore, now I'm able to see, well, actually this change was okay, but this one over here, this thing that I did, actually is affecting the whole, and that's awesome. That is really neat.
Yeah, I was gonna say another benefit of being able to group changes like that is that you can group them through other elements in New Relic, right? Like in your service levels or in your workloads. And so then you can track this over time, to Camden's point. So there's sort of like three elements here. You can automate the tracking of the markers and the implementation of the markers. You can, in real time, sort of troubleshoot when you see an issue. And then you could even set up custom dashboards of how quickly you're deploying, how often you have to roll back, whatever it is you really want to track. You can even then sort of add meta markers to those dashboards and then be like, well, we initiated a change in our CI/CD pipeline that led to being able to deploy 5 more times a week, or, whatever metric you want to track. And so it's like, it's not just the metrics itself, but you can then start to track the CI/CD process as a whole over time.
Very nice. Okay, we keep interrupting Camden. Like, it's
no worries. No, it's good. I should be interrupted. Frankly, I have a tendency to go on. I second everything you just said, Dan. It's exactly right. It's a good way to put it. And speaking of dashboards, it's a good segue. So I've mentioned this a couple of times, but what does it actually look like to add change tracking markers to your dashboard? Well, there's certainly there's a few different ways to do it, and we'll be releasing some materials and some helpful guides on some tips and tricks for dashboards. We even want to, either at launch or shortly after, as a fast follow, release sort of a pre-built I/O dashboard that you can use to start getting your feet wet with deployment markers on dashboards. But a really basic, I think, straightforward way of just kind of looking at this now is the query that is going to include deployment markers on a time series chart, whether it's a line chart or a bar chart or whatever. You'll notice here in this example, and this may be a little small, but you'll notice that there's this entity GUID that's specified, and that's important right now for the NERQL, or our kind of bespoke query language, to know which entity it should be getting deployment markers for. So either the entity GUID or the app name. If we open this in Query Builder, though, one, I think, pretty straightforward way of getting these things into your custom dashboards is to go to, say, a curated experience where you're seeing the deployment markers, because it already specifies these GUIDs or app names. And then being able to kind of add these to the dashboard from here, you can make the changes that you want. Maybe you want multiple entities showing deployment markers in one time series chart, which is possible. Or whatever else, what other changes you want to make to this query, and then just quickly kind of from Query Builder add it to your dashboard, and you can see an example of that having been done here. So this is a custom dashboard. This is a place where you normally would have never been able to see anything about deployments at all, even with the old APM system, or changes in general. And now you can see these change tracking markers. And of course, you can click on this and you can get the same experience that we've been looking at in APM as an example, the analysis UI with the faceted, results from errors inbox, logs, alerts, and so on. So we think this is huge. This has been one of the biggest requests for years and years and years, was I want to be able to bring this into my custom dashboards. And for those that are wondering, yes, this does mean that all of the deployments data ingested either via this NerdGraph API or even from the REST API going forward will be in NRDB, in our single, source of truth database, so that you can do with it what you will, using NERQL queries and what have you. So big moves on that front too.
Yeah, and that speaks to something that I say a lot at conferences and stuff like that when people say, well, how do I get started? And one of the best ways to get started is to take one of the examples that we've given you. The examples aren't necessarily, not always, supposed to be the best practice. Often they are simply an example to show, hey, did you know this was possible? So when you see one of the one of the objects in any of the dashboards that we give you as part of the getting started, take that and just model off of it, copy off of it, or enhance, use that as the way to get started, is just to leverage it and build off of there. That's one of the fastest and best ways to learn how to do something, is just take this, really bad example in some cases and make it yours and make it more relevant. So,
right. Yeah. And there's some really interesting synergy with dashboards already that we're seeing. And one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten was basically, if a query needs to specify an app name or an entity GUID to get deployment markers, of course, naturally a user might say, that's great, but I don't know all my app names or all my entity GUIDs. I have 8,000 of them.
Right.
What do I do? And shout out to the dashboards team who've just released their dashboards variable feature. But there's a way now using dashboards, and maybe we'll link to this in the show notes. But there's a way now to use a variable that you specify using a NERQL query to say, get me all of the entity GUIDs from that match that are return with this query, and you can actually use that now as a way of sort of automatically determining in all of the queries on that dashboard which entities should be specified here. So there's some really interesting synergy there that kind of help, I think, take the sharp edge off the fact that the queries need to know kind of a GUID or an app name in order to return these deployment markers. So the timing of the release of that variables feature, which I think was only last month, is actually working out pretty well for the release here of change tracking.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That's a lot to get us started with. Is there anything else that you want to show us? Is there more?
No, I think maybe the only other thing I'll mention is just our goal, again, is to support any entity type and any type of change on any entity type. And so, when we think about these, especially these little billboards at the top, errors, logs, alerts, think of this as a little starter pack, of when you finally bought your first Magic the Gathering starter pack or something. These are the first 3 cards that we're sort of doling out. But what we want essentially is we want an entire, there'll be, let's call them booster packs. We'll have some booster packs over time that, depending on the context, so depending on the type of entity you're looking at, maybe it's browser, not APM, and so the insights that you want to bring in here are going to be a little bit different, or the context. Or let's say you just don't use New Relic log management. You should use New Relic log management, but let's say you don't. And so this billboard here is always going to be in its empty state. We want to be able to sort of dole out another insight card that's going to be more relevant to your experience. So something to note is keep an eye on this section up here. I think there's some really cool things planned for vulnerability management, which is a new product New Relic just released, integrations, insights from your CI/CD pipelines, insights from integrations. All of that might be, doled out up here, just to kind of really create a nice, we know the context you're coming from, we know the type of entity you're looking at, we're starting to get a good sense of what your priorities are, and we want to make sure that you're seeing the highest quality, most relevant information based on that context. So it's the only other thing I'll prattle on about.
Very cool. Now, I mean, we could probably keep going for another hour, but out of respect for the audience's time and also the fact that you can only keep the firehouse going for so long before people start to walk away, I think we should probably, call it quits here for now. We will, I'm sure, have more changelog episodes on this. Okay, so that takes us to the lightning round. Just any final thoughts or ideas? I will kick us off. I will remind everyone that, frustration with development turned inward is drinking. Frustration with development turned outward apparently is change tracking. So, just be aware of the fact that change tracking is a healthier choice in a lot of cases. Also, lollipops is, Camden, the official name for that element now. I don't make the rules, but that is what everyone now has to call it. And the last point is, with your Magic the Gathering example, I think that now people are going to be looking for the Black Lotus of dashboards. They're going to be waiting to try to find that one, or claiming that they have built the Black Lotus of dashboards, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Banned already, I'm sorry to say. It's not going to be permitted in standard format. So
in standard format? Oh, got it. Okay, there we go. So... Okay, that's what I got. Nothing really deep or particularly meaningful. Dan, why don't you, any final thoughts, any final ideas?
Yeah, for sure. I think the big thing is the just extensibility of change tracking. I mean, pretty much anybody's going to be able to use it. You can get markers on all the charts. To your point, it's in NRDB. It's fully kind of configurable and extensible to your use case. And it comes out of the box automatically. You can just simply add the change event markers to deployments and then track related kind of deployments and related entities and how these changes affect all of these different services that are also interconnected. And you'll get all of the crucial metadata, links, version numbers, timestamps, descriptions, everything. And so you can quickly see just exactly how change is affecting your environment, not only at that time or within, that time window, but just over time, how can you more reliably make deployments faster? And so, I'll kind of just leave it at that, I think.
Awesome. All right, Camden, bring us home.
I just can't wait to see people start using this. Please do just get your hands dirty as quickly as possible, push the limits of this, give us feedback. Any and all feedback is more than welcome. So I'm just really excited to see this out in the wild, and just once it's out in the wild, it's its own thing. Just sort of like
right.
Fly.
More than that is that once it's out in the wild, once people have their hands on it, they have opinions about it, and that's what keeps us going. This is a feedback loop. So we put out a feature or a capability, then we hear about people who are using it in maybe unexpected ways, but also like, oh, it was so close, but if only you blah blah, and that's where we say, give me a minute, we'll make it do that. So absolutely, as you start to play with it, if it's not quite what you wanted, or you would love to see it even go even further, that's what you want to hear. That's what drives us, right? So no, I love it. Well, I want to thank both of you for taking some time out of the day to talk about this. I'm excited to start playing around with it. Hopefully the folks who are watching this episode are too. Just thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Leon.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also want to thank everyone watching. There is an overwhelming choice of video content to binge on these days, and we want to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us today. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe so you can get notifications when new episodes drop. For New Relic Changelog, I'm Leon Adato.